Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast. It's the Monday edition from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm Chris Carter. He's Ray Fittipaldo. We're your Steelers writers. And as always, you can find the show on every podcast on all your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this show if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Of course, the Steelers played their first preseason game of the year against the Jaguars. They won 31-25. That doesn't matter as much. Brian and I reacted to it the night of, but we're here to break down more of our insights from that game. And Ray, you did your rising and falling players, and there were quite a few players from the receiver position that were rising. And I guess it's kind of natural when you put up 31 points in a preseason game and your quarterbacks go a collective 4 touchdowns and 0 interceptions.
Yeah.
And you got guys that are probably going to make the roster and probably not going to make the roster, both all making plays.
Yeah, really, right from the jump. Arthur Smith did a really good job of, I thought, scheming guys open, going play action early. He had some boots early in that game. And, Roman Wilson got untracked early. And then, I thought Scotty Miller was really good, Chris. He had 4 catches for 47 yards. He had a couple on that touchdown drive late in the half. So, I think Scotty Miller has been one of the more consistent receivers at training camp and practice. And then when you carry that over into games, Mike Tomlin always weighs these games a little bit more than practice. Like the practices are important, but he always says in-game stadium evaluations is a huge component of him putting together the 53-man roster. And I don't know if you noticed this, Chris, but Robert Woods was playing into the third quarter, maybe even into the fourth quarter, when all the other guys were out of the game. So when they signed him, I thought, okay, he's probably on the 53. I'm not so sure about that now. I think they're trying to figure out how much Robert Woods has left in the tank. And I think as long as Scotty Miller continues to perform at the level he is, I think Robert Woods could be in trouble.
I think he is in trouble. Roman Wilson went out, made 2 catches, and got pulled. Scotty Miller exceeded when they kept him out there. Those 2 guys are going to make the roster, and Ben Skoronek's going to make the roster. So now Robert Woods is in the position where he might just have to hope they keep 6 wide receivers. And Ray, we talked about this during camp, but Robert Woods was brought in to be the Van Jefferson / Allen Robinson of the group. But when you have a guy like DK Metcalf leading the group, you don't need that role anymore. That role was for when Deontay Johnson and George Pickens were the leaders of the wide receiver room, were the guys that were the best talented guys in the group. So you needed a mature face in the locker room to kind of maybe balance that out. You don't need that with this group. On top of that, Scotty Miller kind of brings that because he's been in the NFL for long enough. I do think Robert Woods should be looking over his shoulder right now, because especially if Calvin Austin does get back healthy at some point, you got Metcalf, Austin, Wilson, Miller, and Skowronek, and then you could still be looking at, even if you do keep a 6 wide receiver, Rock Taylor, Brandon Johnson, Tyshawn Williams, another one guy you thought was a riser. There's a lot of guys on this group that they're not wide receiver 2s per se, but they would be decent wide receiver 4, 5, or 6.
Yeah, I think just talking about the young guys, some of the rookies or the undrafted free agents, it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out in terms of the practice squad, because you mentioned a bunch of those guys right now. You didn't even mention Max Hurlman. And I know the Steelers really like his skill set. He's a former, he played offense and defense in college, and then he's making the transition to receiver in the NFL. So I think he's a candidate for the practice squad. Brandon Johnson has been on NFL 53-man rosters before. Keyshawn Williams has been good in camp, and then in the preseason game, and the same with Rock Taylor. So they're going to have some options as far as guys they do want to keep on the practice squad. And a guy like Robert Woods, I don't even know if he would want to be on a practice squad at this stage of his career. Some guys, when that's offered to them, just say, hey, thanks, I'm going to retire. But I think the point is the Steelers have plenty of options that they're going to be able to fill out that practice squad with 2 or 3 guys, and they're going to be pretty deep at that position even after the final cutdowns.
Yeah, I think that's the thing here, is that the depth isn't the issue as far as like having guys that could be there. I think the question is, can they trust that a wide receiver 2 is on this team, that there's a guy that can win consistently when DK Metcalf is getting attention at the wide receiver position. Now, this team added Jonnu Smith at tight end. They have Darnell Washington, who I thought also looked really good in this game. Ray, if you were to compare your thoughts now to the start of camp, how urgent do you think the Steelers should be about wide receiver 2 right now, as far as adding to get it, or that they've already have their guy?
Yeah, like the hard thing, Chris, is we don't know the duration or even what's bothering Calvin Austin. So until we know what's going on there, it's hard for me to say, okay, yeah, they definitely need to go out and get a top 3 guy because Austin's going to be out for a while. He could be back this week or next week, and that's a non-issue. I think I'll go back to what I said even before camp started. I think they have enough targets when you combine the Freiermuths and the Jonnu Smiths and the Washingtons into the equation. But I'm still worried, like if there's an injury to DK Metcalf, Chris,
right,
it's going to be a huge issue. And we just got done talking about the depth, but they don't have the kind of depth where they would have like another guy who could step up and be a 1. So to me, that's the big issue. Maybe you'd make a depth move, like a veteran who maybe has a little bit more juice left than Robert Woods, something along those lines. But yeah, right now I just kind of want to know what's going on with Calvin Austin, before I can even project how that's going to go down the road.
Yeah, and it's been really weird. Like, he just stopped practicing, and then Mike Tomlin hasn't included him in many injury reports. When asked, he's like, "Oh yeah, he'll be back soon," and we haven't seen him. So, considering Calvin Austin's history as far as his rookie season, there's a little bit of concern there because this is also his contract year. This is his 4th year of his rookie deal. He needs to prove it. I think it's going to be interesting to see if he does come back. Who knows if he shows up this week? This could all be forgotten, but certainly something to keep an eye on there. Your point about Scotty Miller, though, and his performance, I do think he is he's shown throughout camp he can get a lot of the little details done. I don't know if you play the immaculate grid, but I don't know if there's too many guys that can say if he catches a touchdown from Aaron Rodgers this year that they caught a touchdown from Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers in their careers. But I think one thing that the Steelers are really going to appreciate about Scotty Miller is he still has speed. I don't think he's Calvin Austin or Roman Wilson fast because they're just younger right now, but he definitely has quickness and he definitely has speed enough to get away from guys, but he also has the refined part to his game where he's more experienced in the NFL. I think he's used to facing cornerbacks in the slot a lot more, and that's something the Steelers are absolutely going to use in this offense.
Yeah, and like Chris, last year, he was on the 53-man roster for a lot of the season, and they just didn't use him that much. But I mean, tell me if you disagree, but I just think he's been so much more involved this year. And maybe it's just the second year with Arthur Smith again, or maybe it's just that he feels a lot more comfortable in his second season with the Steelers. It just seems to me like he's going to be able to come in and be a bigger part of this offense than he was last year.
Yeah, I think that there's I think that's certainly part of it is that, maybe Arthur Smith is finding some room in there. But, the Steelers, and again, this is just a preseason game. It's not definitive what's happening right now or what's going to happen for the whole season. But they at least were able to move the ball in the middle part of the field. I mean, the first pass was Mason Rudolph throwing it down the middle to Roman Wilson for 19 yards. And it seemed, and like we've seen it in practice, they're attacking the middle part of the field. They're using play action, going to tight ends, going to wide receivers. And if that's a staple of this Steelers offense, that's something we haven't seen since Ben Roethlisberger, even with Randy Fichtner. Like that's going back. That's going back a ways since Matt Canada took over. The middle of the field wasn't a thing, and then last year, the first year with Arthur Smith, the middle of the field wasn't a thing. And granted, a lot of that was because of Russell Wilson. But this would be a change of pace, and I think one that will be welcomed by the Steelers because it's going to open up a lot of different things in their offense.
Yeah, I mean, listen, when you're able to throw over the middle of the field or even have that threat, the Steelers haven't even had that threat. It just opens up the offense so much more to you. The defense has to account for it. They can't cheat to outside the numbers. So, adding Jonnu Smith, having Pat Freiermuth again, I think it's going to be a big part of the Steelers' offense. And play action too, Chris. I mean, we saw it early in that game. It was very effective. And when you have an effective play action game, and we didn't see the fruits of this on Saturday night, but if you do that early, potentially it's going to open up the running game. And we could talk about the running game and how that was a little bit slow to form on Saturday night, later this week. But, once they get that play action going, I do think Caleb Johnson, Jalen Warren, when he's in there, Kenneth Gainwell, they're going to have more room to operate in the running game as well.
Absolutely. I want to talk about the other side of the ball here at cornerback in a second. We'll do that here on the North Shore Drive podcast and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But first, I remind you, this show is brought to you by Edgar Steiner and Associates. They also do workers' compensation. When you've been hurt on the job, who decides when you're better? Who decides when your treatment's over? Who decides when your benefits are over? It's the insurance company's doctors. They won't be on your side. You need someone who will be on your side. That's Edgar Steiner and Associates. Call them today at 1-800-94-EDGAR. They'll fight for the workers' compensation rights that you deserve. Remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Stick with us here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Back here in the North Shore Drive podcast and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. This episode is also brought to you by Goldberg, Persky, and White. If you were diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer, call your attorneys at Goldberg, Persky, and White. For over 40 years, their firm has represented thousands of lung cancer and mesothelioma victims. Call 1-800-COMPLEX or visit gpwlaw.com for a free consultation. Ray, we talked about the wide receiver depth. The cornerback depth was on display because the top three corners didn't play. Joey Porter Jr., Jalen Ramsey, Darius Slay all sat out, but Brandin Echols, Beanie Bishop were in. Corey Trice also didn't get to play because he's been injured. What did you think out of the cornerbacks that you did see play? I thought Echols had one of the better breakups of the night where he was playing on like a low buzz zone and then backed up and swatted down a pass where he definitely baited the quarterback into it. It almost picked it off.
Yeah, Beanie Bishop too. Beanie Bishop kind of been the forgotten man in training camp because Jalen Ramsey was brought on board, and Echols even has some flexibility to play inside. When you construct a 46-man game day roster, so I think a lot of people were wondering, how does Beanie Bishop fit in? And I still don't know if we have the answer to that question. But he had 5 tackles, Chris, and he had a pass breakup. And I thought on the first drive of the game, a lot of the talk leading up to that game was Travis Hunter. What's he going to do? Two-way player, one of the best players in the draft. Well, he ran a pattern on 3rd and 5. Beanie Bishop stuck him at 4 yards, and he forced a 4th down. Now, the Jaguars converted it, and they kept their drive going, and they ended up kicking a field goal on it. But Beanie Bishop did his job. So, yeah, I thought Echols and Beanie were really good, and that's what Mike Tomlin always talks about. Guys like Porter and Slay and Ramsey aren't going to play a lot in the preseason, but when guys like Echols and Bishop get their opportunities, they better show up. And I thought both those guys did really well against the Jaguars.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how do they want to fill out this cornerback room because, one, they need Corey Trice to be healthy if he's going to be a part of the mix. But Brandin Echols, I think, has had a good camp for being the 4th cornerback that they're going to use on the roster. I think he's kind of put himself in that position, especially just because he's healthy. But I'm interested to see how do they fill this out. Do they roll with 6 cornerbacks because Mike Tomlin prioritizes his cover men, and that's so important to the defense? Because Beanie Bishop's in a unique spot where Beanie Bishop is he's a slot corner. That's just his size, his skill set. That's exactly what he is. And can you afford to just specifically get a slot corner, or do you need more guys on the roster who are going to be flexible? Because Brandin Echols, we've seen in camp flex between those 2 positions, so he checks that box. He can be outside and inside, but if you were to just roll out 5 cornerbacks, could you go with Brandin Echols and Beanie Bishop? And if you're worried about Corey Trice's health, or do you need to have that 6th guy on your roster?
Yeah, a lot of this is going to depend on Corey Trice, Chris. And, it's so unfortunate for him because, he's fits that profile of what the Steelers want in a quarterback, just the way they want to play. And he just hasn't been available to them. So, Beanie could end up finding his way on the roster if Corey starts the season on IR again, or if they just cut ties with him. But if Corey Trice is healthy, let's say he gets back, then Beanie's, you're kind of looking at, okay, how do we justify keeping him on the 53-man roster? And wouldn't it be an odd circumstance for a guy who had 4 picks as a rookie that if he's cut, maybe he's on the practice squad in his 2nd season? It's not unprecedented. Happens to guys all the time. Teams upgrade all the time, and we all know the Steelers' cornerback situation last spring was a little bit tenuous, and that's why Beanie got the shot that he did. But yeah, he's still in a fight for a roster spot, and I think these final 2 preseason games against the Bucs and the Panthers are going to be really important in his evaluation and whether he does end up making it onto the 53.
Yeah, again, like Mike Tomlin, Teryl Austin prioritizing, covermen as we're hearing them talk about. Like, these are guys that they just need to match up with guys. That's going to be so much more important this year than previous years, where they've had to just rely on a lot of zone, and they're still going to use zone, but as far as trying to make sure that they have guys that can play man, like, I think that's going to be very important to this team, because that's a big part of what they want to do. Mike Tomlin has been talking about the importance of coverage pairing with the pass rush, and that's a way I think they're trying to also support TJ Watt. So having guys that can fill in and do those types of things, I think, is huge for what the Steelers are trying to do this season. It'll just be a matter, I think, of can they find guys that they're confident to fill in games and match up with these receivers and run with them as stride for stride as best as they can.
Yeah. The Steelers defense, to me, Chris, we all heard what Juan Thornhill said last week about how this can be one of the best defenses in the NFL. And, guys say that all the time, but I really think with the upgrades that they made in the secondary and the way they're playing, it's not just like the fact that you add an all-pro, but it's the way that Jalen Ramsey transforms your defense and gives you different options and how you want to play teams. It's been really impressive for me to watch in practices. And we're not going to get a feel for that in the preseason, because I don't think Jalen Ramsey or Darius Slay is going to play, or they might play a series or 2 against the Bucs or the Panthers, but we're not going to be able to see that on display until the opener in New York. I think if what we're witnessing in practice is carried over into games, it's going to be a really, really good secondary. Because I don't know the last time I could sit back and say, boy, the Steelers secondary is the strength of their defense. It's always been the front 7 since TJ Watt has been here, right? Maybe when Joe Hayden was here, they had like a good secondary. But when was the last time they had a very good or a great secondary? And I don't want to heap too much. I don't want to heap too much on them right now, because I know it's still a work in progress. But I do think that potential was there if all these guys stay healthy, for maybe the back end to be better than the front 7. And that's really saying something. I
think, Ray, you might have to go back to like the mid to late 2000s when it was Polamalu, Clark, Taylor, Shea Townsend, Bryant McFadden as a a quintet of defensive backs that they had on the field at the same time. But Jalen Ramsey brings an edge that they've not had at the cornerback position. And if Joey Porter Jr. rises into being that good, and Darius Slay is just the guy that's older and really solid there, and used to have good to decent safety play, you could be right. This could be the best Steelers secondary we have seen maybe since the Cowher years when Rod Woodson was a cornerback with Carnell Lake in this roster. Lots of excitement to be had there. But training camp does resume today, Monday. We're going to be at Saint Vincent College. Get all that coverage by subscribing to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette at post-gazette.com and subscribing to the North Shore Drive podcast on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our daily content that comes out from all of our sports writers. Ray and I will be at practice for Monday, so get our post-practice recap here on the YouTube channel as well. Thanks again, Ray, for joining us. Thank you all for joining us here. Keep it posted with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and the North Shore Drive podcast for all your Steelers updates. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.